Have you ever been with a woman who seemed perfect, strong, independent, proud, yet something very small you did made her soften, grow emotional, and completely shift her demeanor? That wasn't magic. That was understanding. We live in an age where many believe attraction stems from appearance, money, or sweet words. But those are surface illusions. The truth runs deeper, more complex, and far more powerful if we choose to see with reason. Women, no matter how independent or self-sufficient, carry within them quiet emotional mechanisms, often invisible even to themselves. Not to manipulate, not to control, but to understand. And through that understanding, we become better men, calm, grounded, unshaken by approval, unwilling to trade our essence just to be loved. This is not a dating lesson. This is a lesson in self-mastery, in inner observation, and in Stoic elevation. The strengthening of character through Stoic thought. Walk with me through 10 of the most hidden emotional patterns in women. Patterns every rational man must come to know. 1. The power of touch. When the moment and mind align. Touch is one of the most primal forms of human communication. Long before language or writing, humans connected through physical contact. A seemingly simple act with profound nonverbal power. In the context of male-female relationships, especially when it comes to female psychology, touch is more than physical. It's a subtle, deep, subconscious message. The power of touch lies in its biological essence. When humans touch, especially with natural timing, the body releases oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone. Oxytocin plays a central role in fostering trust, safety, and intimacy. For women, this effect is often stronger as their biology and nervous system are more attuned to emotional cues. A gentle touch on the elbow, a light brush of the hair, or a hand guiding her through a narrow space, all can silently convey that the man is calm, in control, and trustworthy. Yet not all touch builds connection. Its impact depends on timing, context, and the man's internal state. If a touch stems from lack of control, urgency, or possessiveness, it creates discomfort, alertness, and distance. A wise man does not touch to satisfy personal need. He doesn't touch out of scarcity, ownership, or to draw attention. He touches as a quiet extension of presence, as if the act itself is a reflection of reasoned thought. Women are highly sensitive to the intent behind action. They don't just feel how you touch, but why you do it. A light touch from a mind clouded by fear of rejection or a craving for approval feels weak. But if it comes from inner stability, without attachment or expectation, it creates safety and awakens connection beneath awareness. The art of touch lies in its restraint, intermittent, never imposed. Like music needs silence to be beautiful, touch only holds power when placed with timing, context, and intention. A man who constantly reaches for contact creates no magic, but one who maintains presence and touches only when there's genuine reason to guide, assist, or share an honest moment leaves a lasting impression. Furthermore, touch at the right time bypasses rational defenses many women construct. Modern women, shaped by pressure to be strong, controlled, and independent, often guard their emotions with sharp intellect. Yet touch is one of the few paths that slip past this barrier. It doesn't speak, it doesn't analyze, it simply moves. And in doing so, it opens emotional doors that words cannot unlock. In Stoic philosophy, action must serve purpose, Every movement, word, or thought must be chosen with reason and rooted in virtue, not impulsive emotion. The Stoic man understands touch is not a tool of control, but a natural expression of understanding, of true presence in the moment. He does nothing because he was taught to do so, but because it reflects who he is, calm, grounded, and inwardly whole. It's undeniable. Women, no matter how strong, rational, or independent, have emotional needs triggered by the sense of safety. And that feeling, more than anything else, can be awakened by a gentle touch, not out of ownership, but out of presence. When a man can enter a woman's space without pressure, without trying to impress, without fear of rejection, then even the smallest touch becomes a symbol of his inner freedom. Conversely, the ungrounded man uses touch as a substitute for speech. When he's lost for words or overwhelmed by emotion, he reaches for action to fill the gap. But this doesn't build connection. It dilutes the meaning of touch. Women feel the difference between a touch born of stability and one born of insecurity. Only the former inspires real closeness. Touch also creates memory. Physical contact, when rare, subtle, and timely, etches itself into a woman's recollection. She may forget what you said, but she will remember the safety or spark you brought in that first moment of contact. And that is what builds lasting, meaningful attraction, not grand gestures or exaggerated emotion. In the end, touch is a language, and like any language, it must be used with purpose. The rational man does not touch to make an impression. He touches as part of an inner dialogue, when words are no longer needed and presence speaks all. In a modern world of rush and surface contact, a slow, calm, sincere touch may be the most powerful way to truly reach a woman's mind. 2. The forbidden fruit effect. Value lies in being inaccessible. In behavioral psychology, the forbidden fruit effect describes the tendency of humans to desire what they cannot easily obtain. When something is restricted, scarce, or just out of reach, its perceived value rises sharply. This mechanism applies not only in economics, where rarity drives price, but is deeply rooted in human psychology, particularly in male-female dynamics. Women are often drawn to men who are not easily grasped, not overly eager, and not immediately claimed. Attraction does not stem from excessive warmth or indulgence, but from a vague uncertainty, where assurance is deliberately absent. When a man isn't always available, doesn't reply instantly, doesn't appear at every turn, a woman is compelled to wonder. And that very question awakens curiosity and sets emotion in motion. This phenomenon is explained by the principle of perceived scarcity. What is hard to reach is often seen as more valuable. Conversely, a man who is constantly present, endlessly accommodating, and ever-pleasing gradually becomes cheap in her emotional perception. Not because he lacks virtue, but because he fails to set boundaries. And it is that absence of boundary that erodes his subconscious appeal. Modern women face an abundance of choices, especially in an age of social media and dating platforms. They receive constant attention, continual praise, and so effortless availability becomes redundant. In a world where men offer interest freely, the one who is unpredictable, unhurried, and not seeking validation stands apart. Inaccessibility here does not mean coldness or deliberate difficulty. It is the natural posture of a man with purpose, work, and ideals, a man not swayed by fleeting emotion. He does not reject connection, but he does not chase it. He is not aloof, but he does not require constant affirmation. And this centered presence generates mystery, an ideal trigger for the forbidden fruit effect. When a woman cannot fully read to a man, she turns inward to analyze, imagine, and interpret. She constructs scenarios and assumptions, and this inner process fosters emotional investment. The longing arises not because the man plays hard to get, but because his presence awakens in her the instinct to reach further, to understand more. Another key to this effect is intentional limitation. When a man can say no, can decline a meeting when it's inconvenient, can preserve personal space without fear of loss, he sends a vital message. I don't need you to feel complete. This psychological state is rare, and therefore naturally attractive. In the course of interaction, if a man maintains his boundaries, his steady rhythm of life, and resists being swept up in the other's emotional tempo, each appearance becomes more valuable. Women begin to regard his presence as an event, not an expectation. This inaccessibility also creates positive uncertainty, a powerful stimulant for the brain. When a woman is unsure whether the man truly likes her, she invests more emotionally to find the answer. This leads to what psychology calls the emotional investment effect. People value most what they've labored to attain. However, the line between inaccessibility and indifference must be clear. If a man offers no response, disregards time and emotional effort, he does not attract. He disconnects. Inaccessibility does not mean retreat, but rather inner discipline, the ability to manage one's energy and offer presence with intention. The essence of the forbidden fruit effect lies in the stimulation of the mind's desire to explore. When a woman is not handed everything, emotions, information, intimacy, the process of approaching the relationship becomes more engaging. A man who does not rush, does not seek to close the deal, and resists the urge to define things prematurely, leaves a deeper impression. From this perspective, maintaining inaccessibility is not a tactic. It is the natural byproduct of living with clarity, purpose, and self-worth. When a man refuses to sacrifice inner stability for external approval, he becomes the antithesis of impulsiveness, something women intuitively recognize. In conclusion, the forbidden fruit effect is not about manipulation or games. It reflects a simple psychological law. What is rare is valued. And in a world of instant access, a man who preserves space, carries a hint of mystery, and holds intrinsic worth becomes memorable, not loudly, but profoundly. 3. Emotional drama. When boredom becomes the enemy of attraction. Attraction in a relationship arises not only from appearance, intellect, or virtue, but from emotion, especially the ability to evoke a range of rich, unexpected, and dynamic feelings. In psychology, the human brain, and particularly the female brain, responds intensely to changes in emotional states. When these shifts occur, the brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure, motivation, and bonding. A relationship that is steady, predictable, repetitive, and lacking in emotional peaks tends to become dull quickly. Boredom is the mental state where the brain finds no stimulation, no anticipation of surprise, and once boredom appears, attraction begins to fade. Conversely, when drama enters, moments of suspense, surprise, joy mixed with light uncertainty, women feel drawn into the experience. They feel alive, not merely existing within the relationship. This mechanism isn't about creating negative drama or artificial conflict. Emotional drama is not instability. It is a controlled variation in how one communicates, reacts, and shows up. For instance, a man might be playful and open today, then thoughtful and quietly distant tomorrow. This change keeps a woman from ever fully predicting his next expression, and that keeps her emotions alert, a deeper connection than prolonged stillness could ever offer. When a woman cannot anticipate what's next, her mind doesn't rest. It begins analyzing, imagining, questioning, and with that, her emotional focus sharpens. The state of not knowing sparks curiosity, which activates the brain's reward system. Each time she receives a positive signal after uncertainty, it feels like a small victory. This draws her back to the man, not because he does something grand, but because his emotional rhythm is far from monotonous. The key difference between a man who brings emotional drama and one who is flat lies not in looks or wealth, but in how he makes her feel about herself in his presence. A man who is always agreeable, always predictable, always avoids tension, tends to dull her emotional energy. In contrast, a man who can lead across emotional tones, gentle, assertive, occasionally challenging, keeps her adapting, and that very process is magnetic. Moreover, emotional drama doesn't have to come from words or dramatic actions. Sometimes it's found in the tempo of interaction, moments of initiative, followed by quiet retreat, depth, followed by lightness, deep care, followed by contemplative silence. All of it creates an emotional current that's non-linear, where the woman feels she's on a journey of discovery with no fixed endpoint. What's rare is a man who can create emotional tension while remaining inwardly grounded. He becomes an emotional anchor. She may be swept by the tide, yet she senses a quiet strength that never loses control. This balance between intensity and composure is the core formula to avoid monotony and preserve lasting attraction. Still, emotional drama must match the stage and setting of the relationship. In early phases, a bit of mystery, unpredictability, or emotional contrast can elevate attention. As the relationship matures, emotional drama may emerge through shared challenges, aligned goals, or deep conversations. Thus, drama need not be daily fluctuation. It can also be a shared, evolving path. In essence, boredom is not a passive state. It is a signal that there is nothing left to anticipate, nothing left to uncover. The man who understands this refuses to let the relationship reach the enough already phase too soon. By creating a rich emotional ecosystem with no fixed script, no rehearsed responses, he keeps attraction in a constant state of renewal. And that is how emotional drama, when shaped by reason, becomes the greatest enemy of boredom and the strongest ally of enduring connection. 4. The voice, when tone becomes the conductor of emotion. In human communication, content makes up only a small part of the total experience. The rest, often overlooked, lies in delivery. Tone, rhythm, pace, silence, and volume control. The voice is not merely a tool for conveying information, but a bridge of emotion, reflecting the speaker's inner state and psychological presence in every social interaction. In the context of male-female dynamics, especially in emotional connection and attraction, the voice acts as an invisible signal. Women tend to respond to a man's voice, not only on a conscious level, but also subconsciously. A voice can make them feel safe, drawn in, or conversely, pushed away if it carries haste, instability, or a lack of composure. A deep, slow, steady voice with a clear cadence tends to evoke confidence, calm, and reliability. These qualities reflect inner mastery, an attractive trait in a woman's perception. In contrast, a high-pitched, rapid, and relentless voice can create pressure or broadcast tension, even when the spoken words are positive. Not only tone, but pacing is crucial. A rational man does not rush his words. He speaks at a measured pace that allows the listener time to receive and process. A pause after a sentence, a brief silence before responding. These signal thoughtfulness, restraint, and strength. For women, such well-timed breaks can heighten anticipation, sharpen focus, and draw them deeper into the conversation. Volume 2 carries more than sound. A man in control of his voice does not need to speak loudly to assert presence. Consistent volume and modulated delivery, especially in direct interaction with women, show that he doesn't need to dominate the space to be heard. Instead, he creates a space others choose to enter. This is a quiet form of power, not power through force, but through presence and respect. The voice can also awaken the imagination in the listener's mind. When a man speaks with gentleness and firmness, the image of who he is becomes clearer to a woman than if he spoke in a flat, emotionless, or overly forceful manner. A voice with depth allows a woman to feel guided and emotionally safe, establishing a deeper channel of connection than any action might offer. Another critical dimension of voice is alignment between words and inner emotion. If a man speaks positively, but his tone is anxious, unsure, or forced, women will sense something is off, even if they can't explain why. On the other hand, when the voice reflects the actual inner state, calm, steady, unguarded, the message lands fully, with multiplied effect. In conversation, women don't just hear, they feel. They respond to each pause, each rise and fall, not just with their ears, but through their emotional nervous system. A man may speak little, but if he does so with patience, steadiness, and restraint, a woman will listen and remember more than if he offered ornate words without presence. The voice is also a stabilizing force in moments of tension or mild conflict. When friction arises, a man need not argue or persuade, often simply lowering his tone, slowing his speech, and remaining calm is enough to diffuse the moment. This not only preserves mutual respect, but also affirms his natural leadership without imposition. The voice, in essence, is the echo of the mind. It cannot be faked for long. If a man is inwardly unstable, reactive, or dependent on external approval, his voice, sooner or later, will betray it. But if the mind is composed, purpose-driven, and free from the sway of others' reactions, the voice becomes a natural source of inspiration, requiring no special technique. In sum, the voice is not merely a means of communication. It is an emotional instrument, transmitting the state of mind, expressing inner energy, and creating lasting attraction through stillness and control. In a world of noise and chaos, a steady, intentional, and timely voice can be the most grounded foundation for real connection between man and woman, not through display, but through silent depth. 5. Hidden jealousy. Value needs no boasting, yet cannot be hidden. Jealousy is one of the most primal and complex emotions in human psychology. It is not merely a reaction to the threat of emotional loss, but a way the brain responds to social signals of competition. In male-female relationships, jealousy often doesn't need to be named to be present. Even when unspoken, it can be quietly activated, especially when a woman senses that the man she cares about is attracting attention from other women. What triggers hidden jealousy is not deliberate provocation or display. Rather, it arises from the man's natural presence, when he expresses personal value without flaunting it, yet unmistakably. Women are quick to perceive whether a man is respected or desired by other women. That recognition does not require public praise or swarms of admirers. Sometimes, a fleeting glance from another woman, or the way people respond to his presence, is enough to stir a subconscious sense of competition. Social value is a real factor in attraction. When a man is noticed by other women, women tend to value him more, not because they are easily swayed, but because the human brain is wired to respond to social proof. In behavioral psychology, this is known as the pre-selection effect. People, especially women, are inclined to believe that a man who has already been chosen or appreciated by others likely possesses qualities worth desiring, even if those traits aren't immediately visible in his appearance or words. Hidden jealousy doesn't surface when a man tries to manufacture competition. On the contrary, if he brags about being desired or clearly aims to impress other women, the effect backfires. Women are attuned to motive. They can sense inauthenticity or attention-seeking behavior. Jealousy only arises deeply and naturally when the man isn't trying to spark it, when he simply lives in alignment with his values and draws attention without performance. A grounded presence, calm demeanor, and emotional self-control often set a man apart in any group. When a woman sees that he isn't chasing validation, doesn't rush to impress, and maintains his personal boundaries in every interaction, she senses a quiet pull that reason cannot explain. When those same traits are recognized and valued by other women, the woman connected to him cannot ignore it. Her sense of possession is subtly challenged, and jealousy emerges as a natural psychological defense. Another powerful element is the randomness of jealousy-triggering moments. Instances such as a woman casually asking him a question at a party, or someone praising his calm energy in front of his partner. These are unscripted, yet deeply impactful. They send the mind a signal. This man could be chosen by someone else. The natural response is increased attentiveness, emotional reinforcement, and in many cases, deeper investment to maintain the bond. Hidden jealousy also relates to the perceived risk of loss. When a woman feels that the man she values may be admired by others, her sense of security is shaken. This isn't rooted in distrust, but in the instinct to protect something precious. The paradox is that this very risk makes the relationship feel more alive. When something dear might be lost, we cherish it more. From this angle, hidden jealousy, if naturally triggered, not forced, can serve as a catalyst for greater depth and connection. The most important truth is this: the man need not do anything to create jealousy. He only needs to live in integrity, uphold his standards, carry himself with respect, and never trade authenticity for approval. When he does this, attraction follows naturally, and that attraction, when quietly acknowledged by other women, signals to his partner that she is with someone of value, someone others quietly desire. In this case, jealousy isn't negative or destructive. It becomes a silent reminder to nurture, appreciate, and never take the bond for granted. 6. Distance, the art of intentional absence. In human relationships, especially between men and women, a psychological paradox often emerges. Constant presence can lead to being taken for granted, while measured absence can heighten perceived value. Distance, when properly moderated, is not emotional detachment, but a form of intentional absence that creates a deep psychological allure. People tend to value what is not constantly available. When a man is always around, always ready, always responding instantly, or showing up whenever called, his presence becomes familiar, predictable, and ultimately loses its uniqueness. This isn't because the woman doesn't appreciate him, but because the human brain naturally assigns greater value to what is rare, scarce, and harder to access. In a relationship, distance is not simply physical separation. It is the preservation of personal space, independent time, and a distinct rhythm of life. When a man is not always present, it isn't due to neglect, but because he is living his life with purpose, responsibility, and focused on his own goals. And that absence becomes a quiet reminder of his intrinsic worth. Women are quick to discern the difference between a man who is purposefully engaged and one who feigns busyness for effect. In the first case, distance sparks curiosity and emotional activation. In the second, it only breeds doubt. The psychological effect of distance lies in anticipation and longing. When a man is not constantly present, each appearance becomes more meaningful. Every infrequent conversation feels deeper, sustained by the sense that I've been waiting for this. In psychology, this reflects the principle of increased emotional value through interruption, similar to how people enjoy a show more when waiting weekly for new episodes rather than binge-watching in one sitting. Distance also helps maintain emotional equilibrium in a relationship. When two people are constantly close, personal boundaries blur. Behaviors, emotions, and reactions begin to merge, often leading to unhealthy dependence. In contrast, when each person maintains a personal sky, a space for growth, learning, and authentic living, their bond isn't worn down by time. In this case, distance strengthens the connection by giving space for longing and anticipation to exist. One unique effect of distance is the feeling of not fully possessing. When a woman senses that a man still has a private world he hasn't fully shared, a portion of time he keeps for himself, or a vision he pursues independently, she feels that he is not entirely hers. And that incompleteness awakens the desire to bond more deeply. It opens a path for emotional connection, not through control, but through exploration. Distance does not have to be expressed through prolonged silence or lack of communication. It can manifest in the prioritization of work, the maintenance of physical discipline, personal skill development, or time spent with friends and family. When a man shows that he hasn't sacrificed his life for the relationship, but knows how to balance it with personal boundaries, he sends the message that he possesses a strong internal structure. This creates subconscious reassurance for the woman, as she senses the relationship is built on autonomy, not dependence. What matters most in maintaining effective distance is consistency. A man cannot disappear and then abruptly reappear as a tactic. Absence must have rhythm and reason. When distance is natural, unforced, and uncalculated, it helps the relationship grow in a healthy direction. It allows both individuals to remain themselves while sustaining emotional connection through longing, expectation, and meaningful encounters. In sum, distance, when skillfully calibrated, is a subtle art in communication and relationship building. It is not withdrawal, nor is it manipulation. It is the mark of a man with an independent inner life, guided by principles and able to allocate energy wisely. This intentional absence produces a positive emotional effect, keeping a woman drawn in, continuously curious and eager to connect. And when a relationship is built on this foundation, its depth is not only greater, it becomes enduring over time. 7. Imagination. When ambiguity awakens desire. In human interaction, especially between men and women, in emotionally charged relationships, imagination plays a greater role than most realize. When something remains unclear, unexplained, or not fully revealed, it triggers the brain to enter a state of analysis, projection, and imagining. It is this very state that gives rise to attraction, not because something is perfect, but because it has not yet been fully understood. Women, according to numerous psychological studies, tend to respond strongly to suggestive cues. When a man doesn't share everything about himself from the start, doesn't over-explain, and doesn't display every side of his personality, that mystery activates a woman's imagination. She begins to ask herself, what is he really thinking? What drives him to act this way? Is he feeling something he's not expressing? These questions aren't mere curiosity. They are the beginning of an emotional bond. When a man doesn't rush to explain, doesn't overshare, he leaves space. And in that space, the woman's imagination begins to operate. She fills in the blanks with her own assumptions, images, and feelings. Through this process, she actively participates in constructing the image of this man in her mind, and this naturally deepens her emotional attachment. Ambiguity, if expressed naturally and with control, does not create feelings of deceit or manipulation. Instead, it opens a path for discovery. In psychology, all humans crave what they cannot fully grasp. When a man says too much, reveals too quickly, he leaves no room for imagination to move. In contrast, when he shares selectively and retains part of his inner world, the woman feels that there is something worthy of exploration, and she invests emotionally in trying to understand more. What's notable is that imagination has the power to amplify emotion. A small detail, the way a man looks without speaking, or a vague but profound statement, can be imagined and remembered long after. A woman might recall that moment daily, reflect on its meaning, and mentally replay it in many forms. Each replay reactivates emotion. Thus, a small act, if suggestive, can leave a deeper mark than elaborate declarations. This phenomenon is also tied to the principle of co-created value. When a woman must use her own imagination to complete the picture of a man, she becomes more deeply bonded to it, because part of who he is, in her mind, is a product of her own creation. This generates a higher degree of psychological investment than simply receiving information passively. However, ambiguity must be paired with inner stability. If a man appears inconsistent, conflicted, or emotionally erratic, the mystery won't spark imagination. It will trigger doubt and insecurity. When ambiguity is coupled with calm character, steady demeanor, and a stable rhythm of life, it allows a woman to feel safe in the process of discovery, rather than confused or unsettled. The stimulation of imagination need not be a deliberate strategy. Sometimes, It reveals itself in the way a man lives, when he doesn't share every detail on social media, doesn't narrate every part of his life, and doesn't seek attention. That discretion becomes a signal that there is more beneath the surface yet to be reached, and this, naturally, becomes a catalyst for a woman's imagination to remain engaged. Additionally, imagination is sparked by unfinished stories. When a man shares part of a story but leaves the rest untold, or recounts an experience with an open ending, the woman will want to know more. She will wonder, what happened next? Why did he stop there? These questions don't need immediate answers. They merely need to be planted, and they will quietly create a subconscious bond. In conclusion, imagination is a powerful force in sustaining and growing emotional attraction. A man need not try to be interesting if he knows how to leave space for others to imagine. When a woman isn't given all the answers, she will seek them, and that very journey becomes the root of enduring desire. Ambiguity, when guided by stability and sincerity, becomes a slow-burning fire, one that sustains deep and lasting connection. 8. Leadership. To lead is not to command, but to go first. Leadership has long been seen as one of the most compelling traits in a man from a woman's perspective. However, leadership here is not about authority or imposing will. It is the ability to set direction, make timely decisions, and act with confidence and consistency, all expressed through behavior, not declarations. In evolutionary psychology, women are drawn to men who can navigate life, not just their own, but also social situations and relationships. A man with innate leadership is often seen as someone capable of protecting, guiding, and maintaining stability in a chaotic world. This appeals to the fundamental need for safety and orientation, not only physical, but also emotional and psychological. One of the clearest signs of leadership in daily life is decisiveness. When a man doesn't avoid decisions or depend entirely on consensus to act, he signals clarity of direction. Conversely, those who constantly seek approval or shy away from small responsibilities are often perceived as lacking personal grounding. Women are keen observers of how a man chooses, from picking a meeting place to resolving conflict or planning long-term direction. The difference between true leadership and control lies in intent and internal energy. A man who leads does not act from the desire to dominate, but from inner stability and clarity in his values. He does not coerce or demand obedience. He simply moves forward, like someone who knows the way and invites others to walk beside him. Often, it is the silent but decisive gesture that holds more weight than authoritative speech. Another key component of leadership in relationships is initiative. When a man initiates deep conversations, concrete plans, actionable solutions, or the defense of shared values, the woman feels guided, not abandoned in passivity. Initiative here is not about control, but about leading, showing that he thinks ahead and is prepared to act for both. Leadership also reveals itself in a man's ability to hold firm to his personal principles. He doesn't shift his views to please others, doesn't abandon values for temporary harmony, and doesn't succumb to emotional manipulation. That firmness provides a sense of safety, that this man has an unshakable core, unaffected by outside influence. Women sense this and often respond positively to such energy, as it offers the promise of lasting steadiness. A man with leadership qualities also knows when to stay silent, when to act, and when to step back. The ability to read a situation and respond accordingly signals emotional intelligence, not shown in words, but in presence and posture. He may not always stand in front, but he is always ready at the right moment, not for attention, but to restore balance. This flexibility proves that leadership is not rigid behavior, but the capacity to adapt, guided by inner principles. The emotional impact of leadership on a woman isn't just in the man's actions, but in the felt sense of shared direction. When a woman feels that the man can set a course, hold his ground, and stay composed even in uncertainty, she no longer feels burdened to manage everything. It allows her to release tension, embrace her femininity, and connect naturally in trust. True leadership seeks no approval and demands no recognition. It is shown in consistent action, steady presence, and the quiet ability to guide a relationship without the need to announce it. A man may never say he leads, but a woman will know it. Through every intentional choice, every grounded gesture, and the calm he brings into every moment. In conclusion, leadership in relationships is not granted. It is proven through specific action. When a man lives with direction, acts by principle, and doesn't need to force his voice to be heard, he becomes a natural guide. And in a woman's psyche, the one who walks ahead with calm and confidence is always the figure of safety, strength, and quiet allure. 9. Intense emotion. We are experience, not service. In relationships, what people remember most is not what was said, but the emotions someone made them feel. Especially in the realm of attraction between men and women, emotion, with all its fluctuations, surprises, and depth, becomes the key force that defines lasting allure. When a man can create intense emotional experiences, he's not only remembered but desired, because we are drawn to what makes us feel, not merely what we hear or see. In contrast, is the model of attraction built on service, where a man tries to please, pamper, and meet every need in hopes of being accepted. Though this may offer short-term comfort, it rarely leaves a lasting imprint because it lacks the emotional resonance needed to form enduring memory. Women, like all humans, are pulled toward what leaves a deep psychological mark, and powerful emotional experience is one of those rare marks. Emotional experience doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic events. It arises from rhythm and variation. When a man knows when to be joyful, when to go silent, when to step back to create space, and when to show up with full presence. This movement keeps a woman from predicting his every turn, placing her in a state of constant awareness, reflection, and emotional adjustment. Each shift in his behavior renews the emotional field. Psychologically, the brain reacts powerfully to the unexpected. Every time something defies expectation, dopamine, the reward neurotransmitter, is released. As dopamine rises, pleasure, excitement, and arousal are activated. A man who guides the relationship, like a non-repetitive journey, keeps a woman's brain subtly lit with anticipation. This becomes the groundwork for what's called emotional addiction. Emotional addiction in relationships is not dependence. It is the bond formed when someone becomes part of our emotional evolution. When women remember a man, they often recall how he made them feel. The suspense of not knowing his thoughts, the surprise of an unexpected reaction, or the stir caused by a small action that held deep meaning. These moments become emotional landmarks etched into memory and feeling. Moral stability and responsibility do not mean emotional flatness. A man can be a pillar, principled and honest, while still evoking deep feeling if he knows how to balance safety with surprise. Emotional intensity isn't created through chaos, but by making others feel more alive in his presence, because that vitality connects them to their own emotions. Often, a man is remembered not for what he gave materially, but for the moments when he made a woman feel like she was stepping into an unfolding journey. Each conversation feels different. Every reaction invites reflection, and even silence carries its own weight. This is not a script, but a true emotional flow built on presence and perceptiveness. Emotional experience also requires adaptive response. A man doesn't react by formula, nor does he try to control with theory. He adjusts to tone, energy, and context. When a woman's emotion shifts, whether gently or abruptly, he does not panic or rush to fix, but allows it to exist, responding with awareness. This creates safety in uncertainty, a rare and magnetic experience. A unique quality of intense emotion is its power to encode memory. The brain tends to store memories tied to strong emotion more vividly than those built on routine. So, a seemingly small act, a timely glance, a perfectly placed word, an unexpected gesture can leave a lasting impression if it is charged with strong feeling. A woman might recall that moment for years, even if she can't explain why it mattered. In the end, a man is not remembered for how well he served, but for the emotional experiences he created that became part of a woman's internal world. He's not a provider of comfort, but a catalyst for awakening feelings others never reached. And it is that vividness, that emotion, that keeps the heart tethered and the memory alive. 10. Subconscious surrender. Everyone longs to follow someone steady. In psychology, the need to be guided is rooted deeply in the human survival instinct. Though modern society has blurred the expression of this primal urge, on a subconscious level, most people, both men and women, still long for a steady emotional anchor, one that allows them to release their defenses and briefly relinquish control over every aspect of their lives. Especially in the dynamic between men and women, a woman's emotional surrender to a steady man does not stem from coercion or domination, but from a profound sense of safety that arises naturally. The concept of surrender here is not negative, nor does it imply dependence. It is the psychological state in which a woman permits herself to soften, to lower her guard, and to embrace receptivity within the relationship. This process does not begin when a man seeks control, but when he displays calm, consistency, and the strength to remain centered in the face of emotional turbulence. When a woman senses that a man can hold space for her full emotional range without being swept away by it, trust begins to take root. The first foundation of natural surrender. A key trigger for this surrender is the man's emotional stability. In relationships, women often express emotion more openly, not only due to biological differences, but also because their neural structures are oriented toward emotional processing. Yet, if these emotions are met without reason, women may feel dismissed or unsupported. A man who does not overreact, who does not rush to fix it, but simply remains present and listens, creates the sense that he possesses the internal space to contain her emotions without being overrun. Moreover, subconscious surrender emerges when a woman perceives clear directional energy from the man. when he knows what he's doing, lives with purpose, and is not easily swayed by external noise, he becomes a stabilizing center within the relationship. This doesn't require dominance or commands, but rather consistency in behavior, in body language, and in the ability to make decisions without seeking constant validation. To be led by someone steady is not dependency, it is release. In many cases, women maintain control simply because they do not perceive safety in the man before them. When confronted with someone indecisive, easily swayed, or overly eager to please, they are forced to become the controller of the relationship. But when faced with a man grounded in values, yet flexible in response, they can relinquish control and return to their natural feminine state, a state built on trust and a willing surrender to positive emotion. Surrender is also tied to biology. In interaction, when a woman feels protected, not just physically, but energetically and psychologically, her body releases neurotransmitters like oxytocin, increasing closeness, trust, and calm. As oxytocin flows, psychological defenses soften. She no longer needs to manage her words, her emotions, or her behavior, because she feels a solid wall standing in front of her. A man may never speak of leading, yet if his actions move first, his reactions remain measured, and his decisions arise from reason rather than impulse. He naturally assumes the role of the leader in the relationship. And when a woman senses that this leadership is firm, benevolent, and unforced, she enters into surrender with ease. She is not being controlled, but willingly hands over the reins because she feels protected in that choice. However, this subconscious surrender does not occur overnight. It is the result of a series of accumulated experiences, from moments when the man remains calm in conflict, to times he doesn't overreact under pressure, to quiet acts like keeping promises without reminders. Each of these adds a brick to the structure of safety being built in her mind. In conclusion, emotional surrender is not a sign of weakness or lack of autonomy in a woman. It is the natural response to being in the presence of a man steady enough to lead. When a man does not seek to assert power, but stands as a calm marker in the midst of chaos, he does not need to demand trust. It rises effortlessly from the depths of her subconscious. We live in an era where attraction is often mistaken for a skill set, a trick, a strategy to get quick results. But if it ends there, every relationship will eventually collapse into disappointment. Because what is gained through technique is just as easily lost when that technique fails. To me, what lingers most from these 10 principles is not about spotting a woman's weakness, but about training to become a man who no longer needs to grasp at anything beyond himself. Strength doesn't come from making others see you as attractive. It comes from how you live when no one is watching. And when we truly live by reason, stand firm in principle, and do not get swept up in fleeting emotion, then attraction arises as a consequence, not a pursuit. Every gesture, every silence, every instance of distance, if not rooted in inner steadiness, becomes nothing more than performance. I don't practice Stoicism to become someone good at managing women. I live by it, so I don't lose myself in a world teaching men to bend in order to be loved. And when we no longer fear rejection, no longer need approval, paradoxically, that is when the most natural kind of attraction begins. If you found value in what was just shared, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. Each video here is not just words, but a reminder that we can become stronger, more rational, and freer each day. And finally, remember this: when you no longer need to prove anything, that's when others begin to see your truest self. See you in the next video.